Hello all you bladers. Today's video we're going to be looking at the secret of the awakened Rise driver. So first of all, as a stock combo, Wizard Fafnir Ratchet Rise Sen was released. Now this was released in Beyblade Burst GT, and it's very well known for being pretty much the worst Beyblade ever. But this is the stock combo. See, Wizard Fafnir, and it's not because of the rubber on the layer. A lot of people think the Wizard Fafnir layer is bad because, oh, there's rubber on it, and it causes friction, and the friction makes the Bey burst. But how do you explain Mirage Fafnir? Or Vanish here, how do you explain that? How do you explain any Beyblade with rubber? How do you explain Ultimate Valkyrie? How do you explain any of those? Lord Spriggan, besides the burst stoppers, that's a given, but the idea is that the slopes of Wizard Fafnir suck. See, the slopes are basically how this little tab, this little square piece aligns with the teeth. Now, you basically raise the slopes, right? So if the slopes, which is this little line here that's parallel to this tab, if you lower the slopes, the teeth actually become higher, and that means you'll make more contact with the teeth. So when you hear the term raised slopes, which is common on like Glide Ragnarok or this, it's basically where the slopes are raised so the teeth sit lower on the Bey, and it's actually easier to burst because the driver doesn't make as much contact with the teeth. So Wizard Fafnir, not because of the rubber, because of its slopes and the chip, which has horrible teeth, bursts very, very easily. And Ratchet, while it's okay, is not the best disc to use. So if you look at the combo as a whole, you'll look at the Rise driver individually also and think, oh, well, it's on Wizard Fafnir. It has to suck, right? I mean, it's a horrible driver, so it's got to be on a horrible stock combo. But that's wrong. You had the same problem with Savior Valkyrie. And so with Savior Valkyrie as an example, you had pretty much the same problem. Savior specialized in KO attack, where Valkyrie specialized in stamina and recoil defense. Where you combine Savior with Valkyrie, you burst very easily, your attack power goes down the drain, and you have shot and 7, which doesn't help its case either. So for that example, Valkyrie and Savior at the time of its release were both top tier parts to use, but because they were on the same stock combo and the stock combo didn't work properly, it took a lot of convincing for people to finally start using Valkyrie and Savior. And by that time, Guilty was already released, and Belial 2 was already released, and it's pretty much self-explanatory at that point. So here, you look at the stock combo, and you look at Rise, and it's overlooked. So it's overlooked, and it's not a very common driver to use either. So I think that's why, first of all, it's not very commonly used, and also because you've got to awaken it for it to actually work properly, at least for how the Awakened Rise works. So the quote-unquote secret of Awakened Rise is just talking about how we awaken the Rise driver, how it works, and some combinations I have in the circle in the background have it weakness or strength against. So here I have 3 versions of the Rise driver. I really like the Rise driver, so I bought 3 versions of it. My original one is basically so worn, it's so flat that you can see the dirt on top of it. Now, an example is with Evolution Dash here. This is a very awakened Evolution Dash, right? So it basically collects dirt. When a driver is awakened, it becomes so flat that dirt starts to collect under it. Now, not dirt where it affects the performance, but you can see little black spots here in Evolution Dash. So in Rise, you can see like the part of it is black and dirty because it's so flat. This is essentially like completely flat. Now, I have a green dark sticker here because that's how I classify it. Now, I have another Rise driver that I bought off of Bays and Bricks, which is a light green sticker here. And this driver is basically flat, but it's a little bit rounder. Now, what this driver does is it's not as good as Riding the Ridge, or it's not as good as LAD, but Rise is also decent for stamina. And if you're looking for like a balanced kind of combination where it can ride the ridge, have good, decent stamina, it obviously won't be able to outspin things like Bearing, but you'd be surprised how close it gets. And this can kind of take the center while still being able to control around it. And so it's basically more of a balanced version, where this is more specifically focused on anti-attack and LAD, where this is like completely flat, so you ride the ridge a lot better. This is a brand new version, never ever ever been used in a stadium. I just traded this with a blader, fellow blader who goes to tournaments in the California scene. I traded it. This is from Pro Series Wizard Fafnir, and it's brand new, never been used. So I just plan to save this until this driver becomes flat, and then I'll wear this down, and just so forth and so forth. So it's key to have some like multiple of these drivers, multiple Rise drivers, to kind of experiment with different levels of wear to kind of see how it works. So the strengths, just to sum it up, are opposite spin stamina, anti-attack, KO defense, and that's pretty much the strengths. The weaknesses are also a strength for specifically like a flat driver is that it will, well, yeah, same thing. And then for a round driver, like a balanced-ish, not as worn kind of driver, is that it can destabilize sharp tip drivers like bearing, but it won't be able to outspin it that easily. So yeah. And then weaknesses obviously are just, it's not the safest driver to use. So you've got to figure out what type of launch works best for you. And you've got to figure out how to launch it in order for it not to self-KO. Now, two combinations that work pretty well with Rise in specifically Dynamite Battle are with these two layers. Now, I know that Dynamite, F-Gear, and Vanish are very common stamina layers, so you might be using them on like a bearing or something, but this is just in general the best, I think, combinations to use. So I did a video on Dynamite Dragon Giga Rise 9. I didn't really highlight the combo too well, but essentially the Dynamite Blade is sleek, smooth, and has very good stamina. It's also obviously compact, so it can give nice smacks while still having good stamina, and it's sleek and small, so it rides the ridge pretty fast. The 9 armor gives it a nice weight to it and adds more weight on specific 3 sides of the blade, which is just nice synergy. And the Dragon Core actually helps with keeping it in the stadium. Where the driver goes out of control, you hit the wall, the Dragon Core will actually use the spring gimmick and recoil back into the stadium, as well as the Dragon Driver, actually like smacking the opponent and kind of recoiling off of the opponent. So the Dragon Core just helps keep Rise in the stadium and not self-KO as much, basically. And Giga works because it kind of keeps the weight upward. So instead of like pushing the weight downward like this one with over, you keep it upward, and the bay is able to go a lot faster around the ridge. Now this one I like using the, Basically this one I like using the less worn Rise driver because it's more sleek, obviously, so you can kind of get more momentum with it, and it's also, you can use it to outspin some stuff, but it depends. Either of these combos you can use any of these on, but as a demonstration for the chip, just kind of bound gimmick, right? So that works with that. You can also, you don't want to use over with Dragon because it tends to burst pretty easily is what I find, but you can also use Illegal because Illegal is actually a lot lighter than over, so it allows for more stamina as well, but you won't have as much, like, you won't be as good for defense and you won't land as many bigger hits. But Illegal is also nice because it has outward weight distribution. So any Giga Illegal works on this. Vanish is more for specifically beating out attack types. And Vanish is less used. I think it's not as good as Dynamite simply because of the spin direction, right? You have to deal with Guilty and Same Spin, and you have to deal with a lot of like bearing drift stuff in opposite spin, where if you're in right spin, you have the luxury of dealing with Guilty and opposite spin, which is a lot easier, and you only have to KO ultimate or savior in same spin, which helps a lot. And you also have less competition in opposite spin, where most of the left spin combos are like Vanish on bearing, so it's easier to beat out in opposite spin. So Vanish Longinus over with 9 is basically a defensive variant. Vanish is very thick in the blade, so if you smack into the opponent, you'll basically, like, it's very big and thick, so you kind of like smush these little contact points, and you'll kind of just like all the rubber around Vanish, which again, it's not the rubber around Wizard, it's the slopes. Vanish has rubber all around it. It's literally like 85%, I don't know where I got that number from, but 85% rubber around the entire blade. Like there's not a single contact point where there isn't rubber, right? It's completely rubber and it still doesn't burst very easily, which is another reason why Longinus is used to kind of keep the bay in the stadium, because with Over and Longinus and 9, you maximize the weight. Now, Over is a lot more downward than Giga or Illegal, which helps in this combination because you want to keep the combination in the stadium. This Vanish I like using on the more... I like using this specifically more on... I keep using the wrong iteration of the Rise. Yep, that was the right one actually, sorry. I like using the more like dark greenish sticker. It's kind of hard to tell with the lighting because the stickers look the same, but this is the flat one. So this basically specifically counters attack types, and it will do good defensively as well as opposite spin. So it's hard to explain if you don't actually have the driver because it's very niche in its use. It's not like it's an anti-attack driver. It will ride the ridge because the idea is that when you have a sharp tip and the ridge around it, when you become flat with the tip, you basically bring the driver low enough to where it catches the stadium and rides around the ridge. Now, just to talk about this, I will do a part 2 here. I just kind of want to get my like talking out of the way in one video for like Secret of the Awakened Rise title video is what I'm going to title this. I'll do a part 1 here and a part 2 where I actually like show it in battles properly, unlike the Dynamite video I did a couple days ago, which was fun, obviously, but it wasn't really highlighting the combo too well. So I'll definitely do a part 2, maybe even part 3, maybe even part 4 or 5, just really going in depth about what the Rise driver does and how it works in battle. But that's for like battles. I just want to get this one video just talking about it and kind of just getting my just rant out of the way, because when I really like a driver or a Beyblade part, I tend to talk a lot about it and I can't like start battling until I get talking out of the way. So it's just, I have to get this talking part out of the way before I actually start battles. But yeah, so Dynamite and Vanish Longinus with Over or Illegal with a 9. You do want to use Over with Vanish, not really anything else. You could use Giga maybe, but Over works best here. And I would actually say that Illegal works best on Dynamite, but because Illegal is such a versatile disc, like Over, don't get me wrong, Over and Giga are very versatile, but Illegal basically takes both of them and combines them. Over is good on stamina stuff that is meant for like bearing or Zone Dash plus Z or bearing Mobius, where it needs like to be in the center. But it's a lot of inward weight and it's a lot of just downward weight distribution, so it can't go as fast. And it's also very heavy, so it tends to burst a little on combos that like to burst. Giga is more upward weight, so it doesn't have as much stability, and it isn't as good for stamina or opposite spin, but obviously it still works for attack and mobile stuff. So Illegal is the most versatile disc in the game because it's round, it's downward, but it's not too downward because Over has this entire circle thing downward. Illegal is hollowed out on the inside, so only the outer part is downward. So even though it's downward and it's like Over where it helps with LAD, it's also light enough to where there's not as much weight in the center and you can move around more. It's lighter around it's heavier around the outer edges, so you have more stamina theoretically. You can move around more. The only thing with Illegal is it's not as good for defense as these two, but it pretty much like combines the aspects of stamina, LAD, and mobility into one disc because it's just Illegal so versatile that you might be using it on another combination. So Giga is probably your best choice for Rise because Rise is a combination you want to include if you know your opponent is going to use attack. You don't want to include it without thinking, of course, unless you're really, really confident with it. So it's definitely a pick and choose kind of driver scenario. So now we're gonna I don't really have too many combos here, but just basically just to demonstrate. So if you have like Winds Perseus over high extend plus dash 8, This combo will basically be the thing that Rise struggles against because High Extend plus Dash is tall and Wind is wide. So with Rise, basically what it likes to do is it likes to stay upright. But because Wind is so wide, High Extend plus Dash is so tall, you have like levels of LED, right? If I spin this, right, it has like levels of LED. It likes to roll around, right? So even if it gets under Rise, it'll still like spin. So combos that are taller, Rise will generally struggle against. But because it's a sharp tip driver, if you're using the less worn driver of Rise, you can actually make it like kind of tilt and get destabilized.
Now, for example, spin direction, right? This is what I was talking about. If I just take the Rise driver off just to demonstrate the combos, let's say you have Dynamite after your Dragon against basically 4 types of combos, right? You have counterclockwise attack, counterclockwise stamina, let's just assume this was on bearing or something, clockwise stamina, and clockwise attack. You have basically the 4 types of combos, right? Dynamite will do well, mostly against these, better than Vanish will, because Vanish is usually on bearing, right? If you look at a left spin stamina combo in competitive, it is usually on a bearing driver. Now, if you look at Wind, it's usually on bearing drifts, or it's on a higher LED driver. So because Dynamite is a right spin bay, you don't have to deal with opposite spin like top tier like drift as much. And you'll do much better against like bearing, which you have a decent chance of beating. You also have the better against guilty versus like ultimate, where guilty is a lot more powerful, but because you're in opposite spin, you also have the luxury of outspinning it in case you don't knock it out. With ultimate, it's not as good as guilty, because you right spin, you can knock it out a lot easier, it's lighter, it's also not as good for stamina. As weird as that sounds, guilty is actually better for stamina than ultimate, simply because it's heavier. So basically, you don't have to deal with opposite spin as much with left, and right spin attack is weaker than left spin attack. So you're in the opposite spin of what you want to be, and you're in the same spin of what you want to be. The only weakness is, of course, against Wind on bearing drift or even normal stamina drivers, you won't be able to outspin it as easily. But that's the basic idea. You want to basically, if you take out Wind, and you look at these 3 types of combos, KO attack and opposite spin stamina, where the drivers aren't too crazy for LED, these are the types of combos Rise will do well against. Now, if you switch it up, you have Vanish, and let's just say you had let's just say this was Vanish, right? So you have a left spin stamina type, assuming
This is Dynamite battle. You have the same combos here. Vanish, again, on Rise, will not do as well against left spin stamina, as Dynamite will not do as well against Wind. But the difference here is that you also are up against Wind, which is usually on higher LED drivers. So you also have to deal with more opposite spin. You won't have as good of a chance of winning. You really, really, really do well against Ultimate though, because Ultimate is not... It's like Vanish counters a bunch of right spin attacks so easily. But the thing is, you have to deal with guilty and same spin. And because of that, you have a slight chance of bursting or not even, or getting knocked out by guilty. Sometimes you go for the attack, but guilty comes up and around and knocks you out instead. So with Vanish, you basically have to deal with guilty and same spin and drift and opposite spin. Where with Dynamite, you have to deal with bearing and opposite spin and guilty and opposite spin. So the question is, would you rather deal with higher LED and opposite spin and guilty and same spin, or would you rather deal with higher LED and same spin and guilty and opposite spin? It's just Dynamite, because of the spin direction and the meta, is better to use, especially because now that you have Dynamite on Rise, you can use Wind on stamina drivers, you can use Ultimate or Guilty on attack, and you can use Vanish for a left spin stamina type. So you're still versatile enough, because with Dynamite, you have Dynamite and Wind. So you have 2 choices for stamina. So again, this was not really this was basically just me ranting about the driver because I wanted to, and I like talking about the driver. But this was part 1. I will do a part 2, definitely, maybe a part 3 if I feel like I need to. But basically, this was just explaining how the Rise driver works, some combinations, and in part 2, I'll actually demonstrate with some battles. And yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. Subscribe if you enjoyed, and let me know some other combos you want to see in the comments, maybe for competitive, some drivers maybe you want me to go over. Maybe some just video requests, anything like that. And yeah, so that's pretty much it for this video. Subscribe if you enjoyed, have fun, and don't forget to keep on blading.